Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting to you from Washington, D.C. And the lid is blowing off the world. We're entering into a period of aggravated world strategic and economic crisis. And remember, the way out of it is through initiatives like the Dan Burdorf campaign in Nebraska, the Credico for Governor campaign in New York State, and the James Hinton campaign for U.S. Congress in Napa, Sonoma, the 5th Congressional District of California. And if there are other people who would like to join this growing candidates movement of the Tax Wall Street Party and the United Front Against Austerity. If you're inside the Democratic Party, outside, you can be in any party at all. We can provide programmatic assistance, and we can also help publicize where you are. So remember, this is a movement to break out of this absurd straitjacket of the Republicans and the Democrats. But let's go to the strategic front. First of all, Ukraine, it's the most dangerous, obviously, because this is the one place in the world where we could have the clash of nuclear-armed forces on both sides. Right now, we've got the Russian aid convoy has now crossed into Ukrainian territory, and they have done so at the point of the checkpoint on the border, one of them which is controlled by the pro-Russian rebels. This, of course, comes, and we talked about this over Twitter last weekend, right? Last weekend, you got to remember, there was this absurd story starting from the London Daily Telegraph and the London Guardian. Perfide Albion, as usual, the worst warmongers of them all, trying to con everybody into a big war. They said, oh, we saw 23 tanks and APCs cross the border into Ukraine. And then Poroshenko came out saying, oh, yeah, and we bombed them to hell. Where's the wreckage? Where's the film? It never happened. And these people are still sticking to their idiotic story. Don't let that go into the annals uncontested. We continued to contest it. It never happened. So right now, the aid trucks, these white vehicles, have come to Lugansk. They have proceeded through roads that are not controlled by the fascist militia. This comes, it's a solution in extremis in some ways. The Ukrainians, of course, con artists, fascists, deception mongers, had stalled this convoy for a week at least, keeping it there while people are being strafed, bombed, bombarded, killed, and otherwise. There's no escort from the International Committee of the Red Cross. That's already suspicious. The Russian Red Cross says, okay, we can do it. ICRC should allow us to escort them. The ICRC now very dubious stance. The ICRC had been clear that it was the Ukrainian sabotage that prevented this convoy from getting across the border. Now we have President Poroshenko is whining that this is a direct invasion. Well, I don't see anything of the kind. And naturally, the Western media are playing along. They constantly harping on the charges by the Kiev fascists, right? The Kiev fascists are worried that this convoy might be used for weapons. It might be a trick, what have you. And they use that to hide the fascist massacre of civilians, right? The pattern seems to be the following. You get the Ukrainian more or less regular forces, if we can use that term. The Ukrainian artillery, Grad rockets, Stalin organs, and so forth, go to the outskirts of these cities, Lugansk and Donetsk, and these are large cities in the 1 million inhabitant range. They bombard the city from the outside, kill lots of civilians, and then they send in the fascist goons of the right sector for massacres. And these are the brigades generally associated with Kolomoisky. You'll remember Kolomoisky, the oligarch, and his forces made their debut with the attack on that government building in Odessa and the massacre of scores of people that were protesting fascist rule in the Ukraine. So now the Reuters dispatches, especially yesterday, were claiming that there was heavy activity at the border, at the checkpoints that are still controlled by the rebels, and there are some, that there were lots and lots of tanks, APCs once again, and volunteers essentially going across the border. That's also in the New York Times. As rebels falter, Russian border buzzes. Well, maybe the New York Times writer was buzzed when he wrote that. The Organization Security Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, monitors say no, only people in khaki, but no guns, no tanks, no APCs visible. So that's all going across. Concerning the notorious Malaysian airliner MH17, you'll be surprised why you haven't heard more about that, right? Where's the finding, right? Where the investigation, what has this led to? Well, a researcher friendly to this program has dug up the fact that there's an international accord that runs this investigation. So far, the Netherlands have signed on, Australia, British pawn, British stooge, Belgium, and Ukraine. They've all signed it. And the details of this, it's interesting, Malaysia is not a part of it. Isn't that amazing? How can you have this without the country to whom the plane belongs? But each of those countries has a secret veto over the release of any and all information. How about that? If you don't hear about it, it's maybe because there's a secret veto being exercised. Once again, this is now time to back off. This is essentially skating along the brink of a huge tragedy. 1 century after Sarajevo, a lot of these characters have learned absolutely nothing. Now, just the Russians take this very seriously. Here we have the communique of the Russian Foreign Ministry on the start of the delivery of humanitarian relief to the southeastern Ukraine. They say they can no longer tolerate the lawlessness of Kiev. The Russian side has decided to act. We are warning against any attempts to thwart this purely humanitarian mission. Those who are ready to continue sacrificing human lives to their own ambitions and geopolitical designs, and who are rudely trampling on the norms and principles of international humanitarian law, will assume complete responsibility. It means Poroshenko, Kolomoisky, this entire gang, Taruta, the oligarchs, right sector, Yarosh, right? They've kept him in the closet, but he's there. Those are his guys doing a lot of the killing. It's clear that if you try to attack the white trucks, then Moscow might have to respond to that. So this is now the situation. Once again, we need people of goodwill to condemn the support coming from the Western governments, the NATO governments, to the Kiev fascist regime. And that goes from Merkel above all, right? If Merkel is supposedly such a sympathetic observer, as Stephen Cohen and others are arguing, let's see some action from Merkel to get away from the brink of a big war. Back in a minute. Here in Washington, D.C., naturally, we are happy to associate ourselves with the campaign Free Andrei Stenin, RIA Novosti reporter, held by fascist forces, presumably in Ukraine. Free Andrew, free our guys, save our guys, I guess. Any of those tags there on on Twitter will keep the pressure up on Poroshenko. We call him Poroshenko because his policies are obscene, right? Genocide is obscene, and that's Poroshenko. Now let's lift and shift into the Syria-Iraq ISIS complex. Now here, this is obviously escalating, and we have this monstrous piece of murderous theater, because that's all you can call it, a publicity stunt of the most gruesome and macabre type, the public killing of James Foley, and that being used to escalate the war and to raise calls for bombing into Syria, where the people making those calls for bombing Syria are not specifying whether they mean bomb Assad and therefore help ISIS, or bomb ISIS and then leave Assad alone, and presumably maybe diminish the ISIS threat. Leading edge of this is Dempsey. Now, Dempsey, of course, is Obama's hand-picked general, and he has been playing along with Obama. In particular, he did that last year at the time of the fake hokum of the Syrian chemical attack, right? Disproved by not one but two articles by the semi-respectable, by now, Seymour Hersh, London Review of Books. But now we have the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Martin Dempsey, talking to a congressional committee on Thursday, and he says, quote, "This is an organization, ISIS, that has an apocalyptic, end-of-days strategic vision that will eventually have to be defeated. Can they be defeated without addressing that part of the organization that resides in Syria? Question mark. The answer is no." So Dempsey and Hagel were there. They don't announce any attacks into Syria, but there's already been one. We'll get to that in a second. Let me also point out that on the same day, Ben Rhodes, the Assad hater, one of the Assad haters in the White House, you remember little Ben Rhodes tried to organize the combined decapitation and television coup of July 2012, right, when the Syrian state apparatus proved more powerful than Ben Rhodes and his fake television broadcast. Well, this obvious Assad hater, Ben Rhodes, says there are no geographic limits or boundaries to our determination to defend U.S. national interest. In other words, we could bomb Syria. Hell, we could go into Iran. This is all madness now. So this is exactly what we warned against, right? That this would be an attempt to go beyond just clobbering ISIS in northern Iraq. We repeat, as we've always said, ISIS is a creation of NATO. It was trained in NATO camps in Jordan by British, French, and U.S. officers. It's supported by money from Saudi Arabia, from Prince Abdel Rahman Faisal, brother of the foreign minister, Prince Saud al-Faisal, brother also of the former ambassador to Washington, Prince Turki al-Faisal. So that's what it is. It's the ultimate CIA secret army. That explains some of the glowing propaganda. Oh, they're so sophisticated. Oh, they're supermen. Who's going to stop them? Oh, my gosh. Obama has made a couple of speeches about this now. Interestingly, the Republicans all demand more. They say whatever Obama does in the way of war making, it's not enough. McCain is the most vocal. We're going to get him in a minute. But and he calls for a whole list of specific insane measures. What you're seeing, and don't forget it, the Republican Party is incurably a party of warmongers. Don't tell me about libertarians. They're warmongers because the people running the State Department and all those other agencies will be neocons. They would have been neocons with Romney. They are neocons, and they will be neocons if a Republican ever gets in the White House. There will be guaranteed war. Of course, Hillary also grave danger in that direction. Time to build an alternative now, like with our candidates that we support, the Tax Wall Street Party and the United Front against austerity. But now, given all this, what else do we know? The U.S. did attack into Syria. It's already happened. Washington posted yesterday, Thursday, August 21st, U.S. conducted failed rescue mission in Syria, and this was to attempt to free James Foley, this guy Sotloff, and some others, Stephen Joel Sotloff, and other U.S. and Western reporters held hostage there. So there was a firefight. They didn't find the hostages, and it turned out the Washington Post had learned of the event and was going to publish something, and then the Obama administration held an official a briefing by two poobahs of the White House. Now, here's the question. Foley was 40 years old, kidnapped in November 2012. Let me just point out, he works for this thing called Global Post, led by this character Balboni. This entire thing fairly reeks of the intelligence community. This is fishy in the extreme. And Foley, of course, had been an anti-Gaddafi propaganda reporter. He was arrested by Gaddafi forces in Libya in the spring of 2011. He was arrested at Brega in April 2011, held by Libyan police for 44 days. But then he got out, and he was in time to be present at Gaddafi's murder, October 2011. He was there when Gaddafi was killed. Who lives by the sword may well die by the sword, karma, whatever you want to call it. He then transferred himself to Syria, where he was working the rebel side, not the Assad side, but the rebel side. Let's get that straight. Then you have to deal with this accusation that he was held by Assad forces. We'll be back in 1 minute on a World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So we're looking at this raid staged by the U.S. into Syria that would have been around the July 4th, give or take, time frame. What's striking about this is that there was no coordination mentioned with the Syrian government. What's wrong here? The Syrian government has every reason to wipe out these ISIS terrorists. Why mount a raid when you could presumably coordinate it? Right? What the hell are we talking about here? What are they going to do? Tip off the ISIS so they can run away and then go and kill more Syrian army people? Ridiculous. Were they looking for a clash, right? You go into a country like this, even with these supermen of Delta Force and the SEAL commands, the supermen calling themselves the Night Stalkers in their stealth helicopters and all the rest of this claptrap. You might have a clash. You might start killing Syrian soldiers by mistake. Is that what they were looking for? This kind of crap, amateur night, has to end. You've got a government there that's happy, eager to attack ISIS, to wipe out these terrorist rebels. Drop the hostility. Drop this vendetta against Assad. Kerry, swallow your pride or resign. Go back to the Skull and Bones vault and stop doing this stuff. Now, as far as James Foley is concerned, my guess is this. He was pro-rebel. He was pro-terrorist rebel in Libya, participating or present at least at the killing of Gaddafi. Then he switched over along with the flow. He went with the flow of jihadis and weapons, perhaps from Benghazi, right? Perhaps under the auspices of Ambassador Stevens and the Benghazi mission, whatever that was. Then ended up in Syria with the rebels. And we'll talk about this. However, The FBI says an organized gang captured him in November 2012. Now, just before that, and this is my suspicious point, James had James Foley had filed a story saying, oh, people in Aleppo are really fed up with these rebels. Man, these rebels are really unpopular in Aleppo. People are sick of war. They're sick of their administration. They're sick of their oppression and all this other stuff. Was that the thing that got him bumped off? Did the controllers of this entire thing say, well, James Foley, you've gone off the reservation. We're going to find some other way to use you, and you're not going to like it. And here it went. This character Balboni of this global Post, also a very suspicious character, reeks of the intelligence community. So we've got that entire mystery. Now, just in terms of how they play this in the Washington Post of today. He was held in eastern Syria with a dozen other captives, including Western journalists. The captors are British members of the Islamic State. Last week sent his family and employer an email threatening to kill him. Are these people freelancers? Or are they from MI6? Is this this convenient, horrendous video? Is that something that somebody in the London oligarchy wanted to see to get the U.S. into war once again? And here we go. It's clear here. Balboni now says, we knew exactly where he was from the released hostages. We knew that his immediate jailers were British jihadists. The guy who killed him, allegedly Jihad John, right? We've had Jihad Jane some years ago. Now we have Jihad John from the British side. However, this is an interesting paragraph in the Washington Post of yesterday morning. For the first year of his captivity, Global Post and Foley's family were sure that he was being held by the Syrian government, according to articles on the website at the time. But last fall, they announced that they no longer believed that to be the case and said that they would make no further comments on his situation. Well, they never had any proof. There was no proof. This was simply a bald assertion trying to pin this on Assad. And what's the percentage for Assad in that? What is he supposed to gain? Now, in terms of the British, you want to get the background, 9/11 synthetic terror made in USA, any edition. I'm looking at the 5th edition. Turn to page 175, Al-Qaeda and so forth. Al-Qaeda and Londonistan. And Londonistan, here's the take from the London Daily Telegraph, November 20th, 1999. Britain is now an international center for Islamic militancy on a huge scale, and the capital, London, is home to a bewildering variety of radical Islamic movements, many of which make no secret of their commitment to violence and terrorism to achieve their goals. We've also got Putin saying in 2001, in London, there is a recruitment station for people who want to go and join the combat in Chechnya. And the following countries between 1995 and 1999, again, it's all in 9/11 synthetic terror made in USA, any edition. The following countries protested the harboring of terrorists by the British: Israel, Algeria, Turkey, Libya, Yemen, India, Egypt, France, Peru, Germany, Nigeria, Russia. And most dramatic, Gaddafi on Al Jazeera after 9/11. Gaddafi says to Al Jazeera, I'm puzzled. If America were serious about eliminating terrorism, the first capital the U.S. should rock with cruise missiles is London. London! The British woman interviewer scandalized. He says, London, it's the center of terrorism. It gives safe housing to the terrorists. As long as you don't bomb London, you're not serious. You're using a double standard. London has more terrorists than Kabul. You get the picture. 9/11 synthetic terror made in USA. Best orientation in these matters by far. So now we've also got to look at this very interesting work from our friend Thierry Maison of the Voltaire Network. Let's go and find that one if we can. It's essentially the story of John McCain cavorting with terrorists. I've sent out a Twitter about this, right? Here it's the afternoon of the 22nd of August. John McCain, conductor of the Arab Spring and the Caliph. So behind ISIS is who? Well, significantly, McCain, especially his trip to Syria, April 2013, set up by pro-terrorist Ambassador Ford. Here he is in Syria cavorting. You'll remember he was cavorting with the guy who was later exposed as a cannibal, eating a human heart. But then we have a very interesting picture, a very serious meeting, pro-democracy forces, John McCain meeting the heads of the Free Syrian Army. So at this point, they're all calling themselves Free Syrian Army, including the cannibal. In the left foreground, Ibrahim el-Badri. Now, el-Badri is none other than Baghdadi. He's the caliph. So McCain was cavorting in the same room with the caliph, and Salim Idris, the former head of the military Free Syrian Army Council, right? They're all there. So the idea is, as Mason absolutely correctly points out, one day they can be Free Syrian Army when they've got to meet McCain and try to get money and weapons and political support. The next day they can be al-Nusra. Why not? And then the next day they can become ISIS. And it turns out that this character, Baghdadi, the one we now know as Baghdadi, Badri, had already founded ISIS when he came into the room with McCain. So take a look at that. That's on Voltaire Network. John McCain, conductor of the Arab Spring. Get the link on top of my Twitter. Welcome back to the World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So the ISIS still have this Joel Sotloff, and they say they're going to kill him. Do not be stampeded. And remember, the real way to put an end to this is an ultimatum directed especially to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, Oman, the entire Gulf Cooperation Council, saying, stop supporting ISIS. Stop the arms. Stop the financial support coming from those governments and citizens of those countries. Crack down, because it's the Saudis who, or Qatar and it undoubtedly varies, right? Different groups. But this has got to end. That is more important than the military side. It's more important than the government in Baghdad. So there we have it. Now, Ferguson, Missouri. Let's talk about this. I can't get into this stuff about policing and so forth. Obviously, police are too aggressive. Police are too heavily armed. Police should back off. I certainly think that cop who's accused of this should by now have been arrested. The prosecutor should have been ousted because of his obvious prejudices, right? The fact that he's from a 1,000% police family. But this gets us not very far. What I'm astounded by is people who spend hours talking about this without proposing solutions. What are the solutions? Well, you're dealing with unemployment, despair, and social anomie. And what do you do about that? Well, the general framework, of course, is my program, 30 million new productive jobs paid for by a credit stimulus window, the Main Street window, the infrastructure window at the Federal Reserve, acting as a national bank, nationalized in whole or in part, seized from the hands of the private bankers and Wall Street predators by the United States government. However, one of the problems here is that some of the people involved who need these jobs most are going to have a very hard time getting hired in any kind of contractor setting, right? Private sector as government contractor. So therefore, we've got to go back to a wise measure, too modest, certainly, but I'm talking about H.R. 1000, the Humphrey Hawkins Full Employment and Training Act, sponsored by Representative John Conyers of the Detroit area. And the general framework is this. However, a couple of changes. The first, of course, is taxing Wall Street speculation has to be 1% of all turnover. The federal government can take that money. They can split it with the states. That's also part of the package. But a 1% robust Wall Street sales tax. And what do you do with that? Well, then you've got to create, I would say, for next summer, you've got to create something like 5 million jobs for high school kids, for teenagers, for youth unemployed, say up to the age of 22 or 25. You got to learn the skills. You got to learn how to work. You got to learn how to punch the time clock, show up on time, all this other stuff, the culture of work. Get people off the streets, right? You can also have a civilian conservation corps. Sure, for people whose tastes go in that direction, fine. CCC, several 100,000 more can be busied in that way. And of course, these are productive projects, right? They lead to infrastructure improvement, right? You can do all kinds of useful work that will increase the overall productivity of labor in the United States. What I'm thinking of is Marion Barry, God bless him, the former mayor of the District of Columbia. The thing that got him in hot water was every summer the District of Columbia government under Marion Barry would say, we guarantee a job to every teenager who needs it. There were no riots during those years. Every company would get a quota. They'd be told, look, here's what you've got to come up with. You want to call it a shakedown, you can call it whatever you want. But it meant social peace, and it was a tremendous benefit for all kinds of people who needed the work. And not all of them were black. And that, I think, you can see why there was a task force, a Get Barry task force created to entrap him, right? And obviously he fell into it with the crack cocaine in the hotel room. But that was not the reason. The reason was that he wanted to provide jobs, and the private sector was told to cough up. A real president right now, I would say, would make a speech somehow saying, private sector, you better look to Christmas vacation, and you better look to spring break next year, because we want to see several million high school students and college students hired during those breaks. And then next summer, we want 5 million jobs for teenagers so we can attack the youth unemployment. And, of course, the overall picture is the initial 30 million new productive jobs at union wages paid for by the Federal Reserve. We're also looking at Argentina. We're looking at this ongoing attempt by Judge Griza to extort money to drive Argentina into bankruptcy. This is impossible. If you want to have a reserve currency, not even the, but a reserve currency, you've got to tell your judges you cannot be so partisan and so slanted and so loaded in favor of U.S. predators, hedge fund hyenas and zombie bankers, that you don't see the merit of the Argentine argument. We support Argentina on this. Notice that they're shifting their banking business away from Bank of New York Mellon. Boney Mellon is out, and Banco Nacional of Argentina is in. That is quite typical. Interesting story this week from this guy, Roger Stone. He claims the CIA wanted to assassinate Nixon. Certainly, there is no doubt, the entire Watergate affair was run through the CIA in order to attack Nixon, to attack the presidency, but also to attack Nixon as the current holder. Now, before we get to our panorama of struggle in the second hour, let's just mention a couple of things about the historical context, right? 200 years ago, this weekend, the Battle of Bladensburg against the British, lost by the U.S., the burning of Washington, the burning of the White House, the Capitol, all other government buildings, a couple of exceptions, the Patent Office. Then, however, a hurricane and tornado, and then the British go and attack Baltimore. We'll talk about that. At the time, that's the Star-Spangled Banner. 150 years ago, Sherman stuck before Atlanta. At the end of this month, about the time of our next broadcast, Sherman breaks out of the Atlanta trenches and goes all the way south, cuts off the last rail link, and captures Atlanta. 100 years ago this weekend, around the 23rd of August, we had 25,000 French killed in one day. It's the worst day of World War I for the French army. British on the Somme, July 1916. But this is August 1914. French, 25,000 dead in the Battle of Frontiers. And then 75 years ago, the liberation of Paris. So there we go. Or is it 70? 70 years ago. Sorry. So let's just look into this, use the time we have left here to talk a little bit about the War of 1812. The reason the U.S. was so vulnerable was because the Jeffersonians, this is one of the worst presidents the United States has ever had. Jefferson had refused to recharter the Bank of the United States in 1811. This deprived the country of a stable currency and the machinery needed for floating loans. And therefore, we had Gallatin, this Swiss-British agent, Jefferson's darling, coming into power as Secretary of the Treasury and deciding the only priority was debt reduction, and therefore we're going to destroy the Army and the Navy. So the U.S. went into this with no Army, no Navy, because practically the Austrian school, in this case the Swiss school, decided everything is subordinate to debt reduction, and if we cut the debt, everything will be okay. And it didn't work out, did it? We'll have some more about this maybe next week, but that's the framework. Welcome back to Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting from Washington, D.C. So now we're going to get our reports from the field, right? From the field. And this means starting now with Reverend Edward Pinkney in Benton Harbor, Michigan. He is now in the midst of a recall campaign to recall the, what can we say, the self-styled or the imposed so-called Mayor Hightower, who is an agent of Wall Street by way of the Whirlpool Corporation. So there's also an outrageous case of getting the Reverend an attempted frame-up going on. So please, Reverend, bring us up to date now. Lots of things happening, I'm sure.
Most people would think that we're making this stuff up, but you just can't make it up. This stuff is so real. On Tuesday, I traveled to Lansing, the capital of Michigan, and filed a recall for the clerk. It broke the hearts of the people inside that courthouse. I have never known anybody to be, the look on their face was so disturbing that I could not believe that they felt that terrible. It was amazing. It made the front page of our newspaper that the clerk, the county clerk, the one who filed the lawsuit against herself to stop the May 6th election, is now being recalled. I have went around, and people from all over the county have been calling me and want to join me in this recall. They said, this is the one we should have done first. But I said, no, I think we should take them in steps. But this is something that nobody will believe. One of the reasons that we did, we told them for allowing, this is crucial, for allowing the sheriff department to come into the office and to remove the original Benton Harbor recall petition from the office without a warrant, subpoena, or judge order. Matter of fact, she broke the law.
Yes.
And that's MCL 750.41, 491, and 492. It is so disturbing to them that they would never believe that someone would recall the clerk. Webster, it's been one of those weeks that I tell you, I just can't make this stuff up. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't make it up, Webster. But it appears to be another major victory for the people.
How about that?
Wow.
Well, I guess this is what happens when a private gang takes over the government and they think they can do whatever they want. They can run wild. They're above the law, right? They've got Governor Snyder and the emergency managing operation behind them, and they've got Whirlpool and all that money, and therefore they can trample everybody.
And that is the mentality of the system itself here. And here's something else that people have to know this. They're claiming that they're going to get $23 million worth of military equipment for this small community of 9,000 people, a little less than 10,000. I was at the county board commission meeting on yesterday, and I went completely berserk. They had a big picture in the newspaper of this tank, the new tanks that they're getting. They was lined up. What would you need a tank for a city with less than 10,000 people to patrol this area? And then they had a picture of all of them in their riot gear. I guess it was designed to intimidate the people that live inside the city of Benton Harbor. But I never would anticipated anything like this. But I had a great day there. I had a good chance talking about it. Most of the stuff made the newspaper. So it was just a great day. We just been showing them what we're capable of doing, because if you don't fight back, they're going to run over you. So I believe in fighting back, Webster. I believe in fighting back. I believe that you have to fight back, and you better be man enough to suffer the consequences. You see, that's the key thing. I'm willing to suffer the consequences for the people.
Reverend, if there's $20 million of equipment, war surplus coming from the Pentagon, it means every cop is going to be riding around in his own tank, his own Abrams tank. And that's going to be a great community policing effort when the cop is inside the tank. You can talk to him through a telephone, I guess, on the outside.
I have no idea that their plans, but they was the commissioners was giving each other a high five and standing up. They had the sheriff there yesterday, and it was, but when it was about 12 of us, everybody got up and said something about it, which was tremendous. And we do not want our city police officers being trained like they're soldiers. And don't put them in these soldiers' uniform, because what they're going to do is going to make people go berserk. Because people are angry right now. They're upset, not just in Ferguson, Missouri. I'm talking about all over the country. People are concerned.
Absolutely. It's a long, hot summer of high unemployment, high youth unemployment, despair, anger, and then it explodes when the cops go into this overreaching mode, and then people get killed, and then it just takes off.
Absolutely, and believe me, we had an incident last night where at the high school where a cop put a young lady who was teaching the students in reference to cheerleading, and they came and put her in handcuffs for no reason. And when they called me, it was almost 9:00. And I said, okay, but then they had already broken up. But it's the tension here. I tell you, you can cut it with a knife. It's so thick. But the point is, we have to take a stand, Webster. We can no longer allow them to keep pushing us around. And that's all over the country. It's not just in Benton Harbor. It's not just in Ferguson. It's all over the country. And they shot a second boy in St. Louis. It's getting that way, Webster. It's getting that way. We are just going to have to get people together so they can understand the seriousness of this situation.
Absolutely. And what I talked about in an earlier segment is there's got to be a program. In other words, we would obviously need 30 million new jobs for the United States as a whole to get to full employment. But for the special problem of poor youth, inner city, Appalachian, whatever it is, rural, we'd need at least 5 million jobs, summer jobs and holiday vacation jobs. We should have had them this summer, but start with 5 million and see what that gets you. And that should be paid for by Wall Street, obviously.
No
the people behind Whirlpool. How many teenagers does Whirlpool hire in the summer, right, to give them the experience? I think quite few.
I think if you can count them on one hand, if they do, they're usually family members of some of their puppets. They just don't hire just people directly from the high school itself. They deal with okay, you're one of their puppets, you get your son hired or your daughter hired, and usually I would say 5 or 6 people for the summer.
How about that? And that's out of a plant that hired what, a couple of thousand workers?
It has 4,500 workers.
Wow. All right, Reverend. We have limited time, but can you tell us remind us of the calendar going forward and how people can get in touch and
Absolutely.
Get in touch with you and help you?
The trial of the century will be October 27th on my birthday. We are prepared to go forward and do that. It will be one of the trials that everybody, if you're living close to Michigan, be there in Barron County because it will be lots of fireworks. And if you want to call me and talk to me about this, you can reach me at 269-925-001. Or you can go to my website, bhbanco.org. bhbanco.org.
I'll repeat that in the next segment, Reverend. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week. Hang in there. We'll be looking forward to it. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley reporting from Washington, D.C. It's Friday, the 22nd of August. Now, this is a new candidate that you're going to be meeting today for the first time, a very promising young candidate for Congress. His name is James Hinton. He is running for the U.S. House of Representatives. He is on the ballot in the 5th Congressional District of California. This is the wine country, Napa, Sonoma, Santa Rosa, places around there. And he's on the ballot. He in the primary that was held under the California system, the leading vote getter was Congressman Mike Thompson, a 10-term Democrat, closely linked not only to Nancy Pelosi, but to her sinister husband, Paul Pelosi. But now James Hinton came in second, so he's on the ballot. So we'd like to introduce him to you and commend him to your attention. This is somebody who deserves your support, and this is somebody in a very interesting position because this is a district where there practically is no Republican Party. So it's the kind of future that the entire country will be looking at soon. You get rid of the Republicans, but you still got to deal with those Wall Street Democrats. So, James, welcome.
Thank you for having me on, Webster.
We're delighted. We want you on every week until the election in November and then hopefully beyond that. So tell us a little bit about your situation. Above all, out there in the 5th Congressional District, what kinds of issues do you find are closest to the hearts of voters and activists?
Economics. The ongoing effects of the 2008 Depression. We're not out of it. As a matter of fact, it's getting worse. It could get really bad at any time now. So we need 30 million new jobs. We need a productive economy. We need rising standards of living. This means we need to rebuild the infrastructure of the entire country to start with, because the infrastructure is failing and falling apart. We also have this problem that Wall Street has much too much power. So for economic and political reasons, it is time for Wall Street to begin paying some kind of tax. And right now, they pay virtually nothing. And that starts with a 1% tax on Wall Street turnover. And what I am for is this Wall Street sales tax, also known as the Wall Street transaction tax or the Tobin tax. We need half of this tax in Washington, and half will go to the states as revenue sharing. And that would allow us to ensure, first of all, that there would be no more tax increases at the state level, which is a big issue here in California. And no more sales tax increases, and no more property tax increases. And after the state is fully funded, then we can use that money to focus on infrastructure. But when you get the big infrastructure, we want to have the Federal Reserve open up a special stimulus window. That was done for AIG. That was done for money market funds. And therefore, we want a credit stimulus window. I'd recommend about $5 trillion. The banks, they had about $27 trillion available. That was the line of credit that was there if they needed it. I'm saying about $5 trillion principally for infrastructure to get on the way towards 30 million productive new jobs that we would need for full employment for the first time since 1945. Of course, since we have this terrible problem of student loans, high-interest student loans of $1 trillion total, I would suggest the Federal Reserve simply refinance those student loans at 0%. That would do a great deal toward diminishing this terrible student loan burden on working families. In the 21st century, in order to be fully employable, people need to have a college degree, at least a community college degree, and preferably a bachelor's degree. Are you there, Webster?
Yes, excellent. No, I'm. So what you're talking?
Sometimes. What's that?
What you're talking is a credit stimulus, right? It's not a budget deficit. It's not not a fiscal stimulus, and it's not a monetary stimulus of printing money, but it's a credit stimulus. And as you say,
Correct.
Done for AIG and all kinds of Wall Street institutions in the years after the panic of 2008. So you're essentially saying make that available to the productive economy. Now, suppose I'm a student.
Good.
If I've got $100,000 of debt, tell me exactly how that would work for me. In other words, I've got student loan debt, which is going at 6, 7, 8%.
Instead of you giving Goldman Sachs 8% interest on that $100,000 of student debt you acquired every month, you'd instead get a refinance from probably a 0% century bond or some sort into this $1 trillion window where we would refinance your loan at you for 0%.
All right. So essentially there'd be no burden increasing. In other words, we'd freeze that amount, and this whole burden of excessive interest would be
right. You'd still pay back
neutralized.
$100,000 just without the interest to Goldman Sachs.
Right. And of course, I suppose you could have that repaid over a longer period than today is the case, right? It could be, decades.
Right. Well, you gotta make sure you have enough money to eat and provide for your family. And then after that, we could start paying off our student debt. But they seem like they want first the interest on the loan, and then you can worry about feeding your family after that.
All right, that's excellent. So essentially you're talking Wall Street sales tax and deprivatize the Federal Reserve. Federalize it, make it act like a national bank.
Right, deprivatize it. I'm running on two main economic points. We have a depression, we have a stagnation and decline of the standard of living. Our standard of living in the United States has gone down by 2/3 since 1970. Unemployment, and therefore I want, one, the Wall Street sales tax. When Jerry Brown was about to run for governor to make his political comeback, people recommended to him that he build the Wall Street sales tax into his platform. And tragically, he sought the advice of Paul Pelosi, who lives here in District 5, the Wall Street predator, who was Nancy Pelosi's husband. Paul Pelosi said, no, don't do that. You can't afford to do that on your own. You have to wait for Washington to do that. So it is a federal tax.
Hang on one second, James. We're going to get you at the top of the next segment. Hold that thought. We'll be right back. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. We're delighted to be on the phone with James Hinton, an independent candidate for United States House of Representatives in the 5th Congressional District, Napa-Sonoma, wine country, north of Berkeley, north of the Bay area in California. And he's running against Mike Thompson, 10-term Democrat, Pelosi loyalist, part of the Nancy and Paul Pelosi machine, and he's actually the number 2 Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, which is supposed to be a watchdog agency, but obviously he has not been doing his job there. But we're talking about economics today. James, in terms of this story you were telling, very interesting, that Jerry Brown, somebody had suggested to him, why not go with a Wall Street sales tax? You're going to need revenue. And it was Paul Pelosi who said no. And, of course, the interesting thing about that is this is not the way it works. In the United States, California sets the pace. California is the leader, and then Washington follows. Paul Pelosi says, no, I want Washington to lead and California to follow. That makes no sense, does it?
No, it doesn't make any sense. They should listen to the voters.
Sure thing. Now, James, tell us about your website and tell us how people can volunteer, how they can contribute, how they can help your campaign.
Okay, you can donate to HintonForCongress.com. I've gotten this far and won the primary with a couple $100 of donations so far. So any small amount I can stretch and would go only for necessities. We want to get some yard signs out there and some more pamphlets and buttons and bumper stickers printed, the paraphernalia.
And maybe some radio spots on local AM.
We want to get radio spots. We've got a couple interns from Sonoma State helping us out. There's a couple students there. We're going to be at Oliver's Market this Sunday from 1 to 4. They can stop by and meet and greet us. Check out the platform and tell us what they like.
Okay.
Tell us what their concerns are.
Good. And one other thing, James, the agitation, I think on the West Coast, there's a lot of agitation for living wage, increase the federal minimum wage. How do you come down on that?
Oh, we want to raise the wage. We want to fight for 15. So the reason for this fight is if you go through the history of the minimum wage, the buying power of the minimum wage in constant dollars peaked at about $13 in 1968. You have to restore the buying power of the minimum wage. $15 seems to be the emerging consensus. There's absolutely no evidence that leads to the destruction of jobs. All the research and studies indicate that it increases the number of jobs to some extent. The fight for 15 is very popular out here. But what else sets me apart is 0% student loan refinancing. Elizabeth Warren, at her best, said, let's get student loans down to 0.75% through the federal discount window. But then she unfortunately backed off. That shows what the problem is with the Democratic Party. Hillary didn't want that. Obama didn't want that. Biden didn't want that. Harry Reid didn't like that. Whatever it was, she is now back to about 3.5%. We're now saying 0% for American students. If you are a zombie bank, you can get 0%. Those guys are insolvent. All they have is bankrupt derivatives. Instead, we want to invest in the future of the country. Every student loan should be refinanced at 0%. It's the very least you can do.
All right, James, that's excellent. We obviously wish you every success, and we want you to come back every week from now on. You've already told us a couple of the things you're going to be doing this coming week. I urge everybody to go to HintonForCongress.com. Am I right?
You're right. And also
HintonForCongress.com.
Yeah, even from there you can get our social media links to Facebook and Twitter from the website.
Perfect. All right. So I think you're actually in an excellent position, right? You are on the ballot. There is no Republican. And people, I think, are beginning to get tired of Mike Thompson, and we'll have some things to say about him in the area of his supposed oversight of the intelligence community, right? The one obvious thing is, if he was supposed to be providing oversight as a watchdog over the NSA and the CIA, and we've now had NSA wiretaps, CIA running the Arab Spring, the emergence of ISIS, and all kinds of other provocations. What are you doing, Mike Thompson? Where are you?
Yeah, well, I think he's out to dinner.
He's out to lunch, I think. All right. Thank you very much, James. We'll see you next week. Hang in there and keep us informed. All right?
All right. Thanks a lot, Webster. We'll talk to you next week.
Okay. Delighted to meet you now on the radio here for the first time. Okay. So this is, we're still in our second, we're in our third segment now. Let me just, I'm hoping the control room can get Randy Credico. Randy Credico, I think, is at the New York State Fair, but we hope to get him, right? We missed him last week. He had been arrested in this police state crackdown, right? We're talking to people like Reverend Pinckney, who's fighting against a frame-up. Credico arrested by the cops in the Dyckman Avenue subway station there in New York City. And we're still hoping for Dan Burdorf in Nebraska, who is going to be addressing the Cattlemen's Association. Take a look at that. That's at danfornebraska.com, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, Dan for Nebraska, you're going to find it. He's going to be at a candidates debate with Ben Sass next week here at the end of August. And that will be obviously interesting. So we're still trying to get them on the line. But now let's just go back to the role of Thomas Jefferson in setting the United States up for a situation where the White House and the Capitol could be burned. All right. Here I'm reading from sort of a pro-populist short history of American democracy by John D. Hicks and George Mowry. This is from the 50s. Hicks, of course, historian of the populist movement. And he goes through the fact that under Jefferson, military preparedness, the U.S. was not well off. The regular army consisted of 7,000 troops, all of whom were needed on garrison duty. The states had militia, but at no time during the War of 1812 did the U.S. government have more than 35,000 men. The Canadian military was more powerful and more qualified than the U.S. The U.S. had all of 16 frigates to contend with 1,000 British ships of the line. Remember, the British had captured the French and Spanish fleets at Trafalgar and similar engagements. And we've got this thing where the Boston oligarchs are not in favor of the U.S. cause. And above all, Gallatin savages the budget. And there's no Army and no Navy. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. And now we're going to go, I think, to the New York State Fair to talk to eminent candidate for governor of New York, Randy Credico. Randy, let me just tell you this before we give you the microphone. Some of our activists of the Tax Wall Street Party out north of San Francisco in California ran into some people, and they said, things are getting really wild here in the U.S. It's really interesting. Why did you see a guy running for governor of New York was just arrested because he was trying to stick up for a black guy in the subway? And we were happy to say, look, we have the Tax Wall Street Party has endorsed Randy Credico for governor of New York, and was person we just heard from on this program, James Hinton, running for Congress out there in the San Francisco area. So welcome. Now, you got to bring us up to date on this whole story. We didn't have you last week because of a technical glitch. So give us the entire picture. Go ahead.
Right. You mean the arrest? Well,
the arrest, yeah.
Yes, sure. Well, I was en route to Westchester after leaving my friend Steve Brown's house, who you had dinner with me at, who lives on the Upper West Side, and I had to go to Westchester to meet with a fellow by the name of Phil Reisman, who's a very well-known, respected reporter, columnist for the Westchester Journal. So I couldn't go down to 42nd Street and take the Metro North. I took the one train. The one train was going to picked up at a train station at the end of the one line in Van Cortlandt and then be driven to Westchester and pass out flyers and be interviewed by this guy. So when I got off the train on Van Cortlandt, I saw the situation. You know, we're right in the middle of a huge, our own Ferguson, Missouri quagmire here with this gentleman who was Eric Garner, who was killed by the police in New York and Staten Island. So, you know, it's huge, a huge issue right now, you know, the militarization of the police force. So I observed three guys, you know, big, tall, young guys in their mid-20s hassling this 75-year-old black man in between subway, uptown and downtown subway trains. So I started video. I took pictures to begin with, because I figured they might be cops. But, you know, just in case they weren't, they didn't have their badges out. All three of them had their badges, it turned out, inside, which is illegal for them to be rousing someone without showing their identity. So I started taking pictures, and then I started videotaping. And then one of them started videotaping me with his personal camera. And I realized you guys are definitely cops. I said, you know, that's illegal to videotape me because I'm not the subject of an investigation. I'm not doing anything illegal here. I'm videotaping, which the Supreme Court, in one of their good judgments, have, you know, declared that it's not illegal to videotape. In New York State, it's totally legal, First Amendment. But they're not supposed to videotape me. So there's some trash talk. This guy says stuff to me. I said some stuff back, and they still never show their badges at this point. My video camera will prove that. Then the guy got up to my face and says, move back 15 feet. Then he pulls out his badge and he arrests me. He lets the other guy go. The three of them let the other guy go. Now it is a 28-hour nightmare life. It's like the Donner Party trying to make it to California at this point, between leaving there and getting out of there. So I was taken to they were transit cops, which are, you know, in those transit, tough job as it is to get people who want to do undercover, and that's what these guys, they ride trains all day looking for anything, you know, to keep poor people off the street, basically, instead of finding them jobs with a huge, as I said yesterday, if we had a massive jobs program based on a taxation of Wall Street and these others, and banks and all of that, a lot of these guys would be working, and you know, they wouldn't need to be drifting around. And so the cops are just looking for anybody right now, just anybody to feed the system. So I ended up going to the local precinct, and they knew I was a candidate for governor, and they totally harassed me when I was there. He tried to humiliate me. They had people coming into and it was only me. It's like Otis and Andy Mayberry is the only person inside the cell, which is behind a locked door, and there's 5 cells adjacent to each other. And they just kept the camera on me, taking pictures like I was the Elephant Man, a real novelty, flipping me off, this kind of low-level kind of recreation. So now, after they finish the paperwork, 4 hours later there, I finally get driven to the worst place of all, which is Bronx Central Booking. And if you ever saw the movie, Brad Davis movie, Oliver Stone movie, that film takes place in Turkey, Midnight Express, those are the kind of conditions I was in, only 10 times worse. Let's think Honduran jails. I've been in a Nicaraguan jail before, back in the 80s, and I was mistakenly arrested because I lost my passport. Nothing compares to the conditions, the squalor, the unsanitary conditions, and the overcrowded conditions of these local. This was actually Bronx, and they wanted to take me there. They were so thrilled. En route to this place, they they were driving real fast, and they come to a complete stop. I didn't have my safety belt on the back. It was a very scary car I was in, no windows or anything, and I'd slam into the back window, and I had a red nose, bloody nose that I got pictures of later. These guys didn't care. They didn't care. There's no accountability. Young guys don't care. A lot of testosterone. They're dealing with a 60-year-old man here who's got like a semi-prostate problem. I couldn't use the restroom, nothing, and they had the belt. The restraints were so tight. When I finally got to it was actually a godsend when I got away from these guys and got inside the rancid conditions of Bronx Central Booking. And one of the guys, an old timer there, who you go through the metal detector, make sure you're not holding anything, and they put you in one cell. They take a picture of your eye. Talk 1984 is happening. It's already here. Taking pictures of your eye, your iris, and all of that, and all sorts of other things. They want all sorts of information about who you live with and everything. And the guy says, "Hey, look, why is this guy's handcuffs on so tight? Loosen him up." The guy says, "This is a cop telling one of these punk guys who spent most of his time gloating and chortling that I was going through the tortures of the damned here, and at the same time he was on his cell phone playing solitaire or whatever. He was constantly on his personal cell phone. Same guy videotaped me, obsessed with his cell phone. And then I spent 20 hours there, and what they did at that point was really baby step the process of getting the paperwork to the DA. Now, and when I got arrested, the reason here's the rationale. There's a warrant for your arrest. A fellow by the name of Randy Gredico with a G. Gredico, and the district attorney, the judge, and the prosecutor, my lawyer could not find my name on any warrant, but I went in on that warrant. And then they threw in the charges like I was Jack the Ripper, 3 charges of dig this, of trying to, menacing, flailing an umbrella at the police. Now, you think I would do that, guys with Glock guns who have a history of being trigger happy? I would, be the Penguin and start, trying to stab them. So I'm Mary Poppins. I'm not the Penguin. I'm nonviolent. So they got me on that. Then they got me on resisting arrest. They always throw the resisting arrest in, like I was running, trying to resist arrest. They always throw that in. It's so cliche to do that. And then obstruction of government administration. By the way, they let the old man go. There was nothing on him. They let him go.
Randy, I'm sorry, the music is on. We're out of time. My conclusion, though, see if you share it, is that this has backfired. You've gotten a tremendous amount of publicity, and people can go to
Credico2014.org.
Credico2014.com.
I couldn't buy that kind of publicity.
There we go. You're famous in California based on this.
Thank you very much, Webster.
So we'll see you next week. We want you every week now until the primary in early September. And sorry about the mix-up of the time. So this, once again, is Webster Tarpley, World Crisis Radio, broadcasting from Washington, D.C. Sorry we didn't get to Dan Burdorf, but he'll be at the Cattlemen's Association. Look it up on danfornebraska.com.